Today's guest is someone whose career spans more than 25 years across public service, consulting, education, and media. And somehow every chapter connects through one theme: helping people and organizations work better together. She's led field service for over 100,000 member nonprofit, created award-winning public awareness television, built cultural awareness training programs inside the Seattle Police Department, and went on to found the Mercer Island Group, now one of the West Coast's most respected management consulting firms. Her clients include companies like Microsoft and Starbucks and Sprint, and many of those relationships have lasted decades. She's also co-author of It's Not About You: Winning New Businesses in a Crowded Agency World, a practical guide drawn from 30 years of studying how agencies actually win and lose businesses. From community dialogue rooms to boardrooms, from public trust to pitch strategy, she spent her career helping leaders get to the heart of what really matters. Robin, I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. That was such a lovely introduction.
So, you started in community outreach roles with the city of Seattle and later the Seattle Police Department, building programs like the Community Police Academy and the Cultural Awareness Training. I'm curious, how did working at the ground level of community trust shape the way you later advised Fortune 500 leaders?
That is a very good question. I think everything in my life has shaped the next thing in my life.
Okay.
Things like having children shape the way you see the world, right? The world
Yeah.
looks different after you have children than before you have children. So every job that I've had, whether it was a volunteer job or a paid job, like I had for Seattle Police Department, it's kind of it took from my past experience, it built new experience, and then it led me to the next thing. I think to answer your question most specifically is my time with the Seattle Police Department taught me a lot about myself,
Okay.
which I think is one of the reasons why I can do what I do today. Coming into it was accidental almost that I ended up working for Seattle Police Department. I had accepted a job for the city of Seattle. And the grant that I was working on happened to be administered by the Seattle Police Department. It was a Department of Justice grant. And I was administering that grant. It was a youth anti-violence grant. And my job was to find groups of kids who could apply for grants to do anti-violence work. And honestly, it was the easiest job I ever had in my life. Giving away money was so easy. And I was very connected in the community throughout the entire Seattle community. And finding those groups was the easiest thing ever and very rewarding, very rewarding.
I can
So
imagine.
because of that, the Seattle Police Department administrator of that grant said, "Hey, you're done with that, but I have other things for you to do if you'd like to stay on." And I did. And so now all of a sudden I'm working inside a police agency, and my eyes were wide open, and my politics didn't match what I thought the politics of police officers were. And I found myself examining my own biases against police officers. My politics leaned left, and my thoughts around police were not the same as what I learned. And I found that there was a lot to learn about myself and working with people that I had my own biases about. And I came to love my job. It was the hardest job, one of the hardest jobs I've ever had. I learned about standing up for myself when I needed to. I learned that you don't have to say everything you think out loud if it gets in the way of being able to do the work that you're going to do. So I think one of the things that I took from that job into the corporate world was learning how to listen and to know which battles to choose, to know when your principles matter more than the outcome of what's going to happen, and when the outcome matters the most, and you've got to determine what to do with your principles. So I think that's the thing that I took with me was learning how to listen, learning how to really, really hear what people were saying, which I think is the job of a consultant. So it helped
Absolutely.
me a lot.
That's such a refreshing perspective. And I love the power of self awareness, of self discovery that you learned through all your jobs. I think that it's such a power it's something so powerful in learning about ourselves. So I love that you had that experience, even though it was very challenging. That you could something good come.
Mhm.
So many good things can come of that. So you implemented study circles to improve race relations in communities, which is
Mhm.
complex, emotional, and deeply human work. Did navigating those conversations change how you think about conflict inside organizations today?
Definitely changed. I mean, you can't do that work without something changing in the way that you think, or else you're not really doing the work. If you're not personally invested in figuring out how you can bring yourself a better version of yourself to those conversations every time you have them, there's no growth happening for you. And especially in conversations around race, being a white woman, if I wasn't ready to examine my role in racism, I wasn't going to be an effective um, facilitator of the program, or certainly not of the circles themselves. So yes, constantly. I had to adjust the way I was thinking. I had to think about, I'm one of those people who I have very strong opinions about things, and sometimes they're very well founded, and sometimes they're less well founded. I try as I get older to have them be more well founded when I say them out loud, but that's a learning experience too. But I also believe that if I go to bed at night without having learned something that day, either about a topic or about myself, it was a wasted day.
Ooh, that's
My job is
powerful.
to learn something every day. There's got to be something out there I didn't know before. I used to ask my children when they came home from school, "What did you learn today?" Say one thing you learned every day. That was what I asked them. Tell me one thing you learned today, and because the answer can't be nothing, because then you didn't work hard enough. Because I know those teachers were working their butts off to teach you
Yeah,
stuff. So if you didn't learn anything, that's on you. There's got to be something. So I take it as my responsibility to learn something each day. And working in the area of race relations, there was a lot of learning I had to do.
yeah,
And so it changed me, and it changed the way that I navigate the world all in. I'm doing far less work in that space now. I'm doing now more work on the marketing side and working with agencies and clients and things like that. But I'm constantly aware of the dynamics around me when it comes to race, when it comes to gender. I'm constantly aware. Sometimes I wish I could stop thinking about it, but that's, of course, would be the privilege of it all, because I don't have to think about it as a white person, but I do think about it all the time as a woman. So yeah, it changes everything.
oh, I love that perspective. This is something I'm gonna take on and I try to apply daily because knowledge is power, and I think that you making a conscious effort to every day learn something new is very powerful. And yeah, I definitely think more people should think that way. So cheers to that mentality.
Thanks.
So between the police community dialogues and the boardrooms and the pitch meetings, I'm curious what has been the hardest room you've ever had to lead and why.
That's an easy one. Um, Doing what we used to be called diversity training for sergeants, lieutenants, captains. The hardest room I was ever in was one of the we Seattle Police Department was instituting a training for all sergeants and above. It was a 4-day training, I think, and one of the modules, one day, was diversity training, as it used to be called. In other words, a recognition that you're serving a diverse community as police officers in a city, a large metropolitan city, and understanding race relations, understanding gender issues, because inside the police department there are serious gender issues. Women are definitely discriminated against inside the police organizations that I've worked in, but also sexual orientation, all of the different areas where the police officers serve the people, and the people are diverse. And so trying to figure out how to get in touch with that and understand the communities that you serve was our job, was to bring that. Myself and another facilitator crafted a 1-day curriculum, and we delivered that to a pilot group. Of course, those were hand-selected people. They loved it. And then we had the first round of the workshops, and a bunch of people signed up to try to get this thing to just crash and burn so they could just end it. I found this out later on, and honestly, they had taken bets as to when the
Oh,
facilitators. They could get us to cry. Now, we never cried out loud in public. I just cried a lot afterwards, but they challenged us in ways that were, it was really hard. It was attacks more than challenges. Did not go well. And we actually ended up having to end early and then speak to the chief, and everything got restructured, and it was all fine after. But that was the hardest room I was ever in. I don't think I spent much time thinking about quitting. More, what ended up happening for me was I stood up after I cried a lot, but I stood up with my colleague, my co-facilitator, and we met with the chief. And he said, people are pretty upset about what happened. I said, really? So we're kind of upset about it too. And he said, we've got to be careful that we don't say things or do things that upset people too much that they won't be able to listen. And I said, well, at whose expense do we adjust things? And he said, they have to be able to say what they think. And I said, well, at our expense, saying terrible things about us? I'm frankly not expendable. And
absolutely.
so unless you have our backs, I'm done. And he said, after a conversation, he said, yeah, well, I've got your back. And I said, so whatever happens going forward, if we just call this and we say we're closing this workshop, these people have to do it again, they're not participating, you're going to say, yes, I support you. And then you're going to ask us what happened. And if that works for you, we're good to go. And he said, you've got it. And it went on to be a really great program. And then all the other projects that came out of that. But the learning to stand up for yourself in a cerebral conversation about, we have to think about the curriculum. That some of it was reflex, my saying I'm not expendable, but that is what we need to do, I think, to be able to get through the hard times, is to know when it's too much, to know when to stop.
Yeah, that must have been really challenging.
It was terrible, but
That
here I am to tell the story, so it's all fine. But it was an unusual situation. And we got through it, but I think this is how life works in many ways. The politics of the corporate world, the politics of any large organization, people trying to figure out how they can keep things the way they need to keep them so that they'll succeed. And then you throw in something into the mix that's different,
yeah.
shakes up the culture. The culture tries to spit it out and reject it, because there are people that have a vested interest in keeping things the same.
Yeah, but change is necessary. It's part of life. It's beautiful. It's powerful. It's transformative. So I'm so inspired that you were part of that change. Definitely more people like you. We need more people like you. So that was very, very brave. I can't imagine the courage that situation must have required of you.
Yeah, yes, I think I was brave, and I'll just say yes. Thank you.
So you created and produced Beyond the Badge, an
Yeah.
award-winning public awareness show for the Seattle Police Department. What did producing television teach you about storytelling that later became useful in consulting and pitch strategy?
Yeah. When I got asked to produce that TV show, I said to my boss at the time, I don't know how to do that. Which, of course, women say out loud. I don't have the qualifications. Regardless of what his men say, yes, I can do it. What was the job again? And then they figure it out. So
Yeah.
fortunately, I had a really great boss, and she, I could say to her, I don't know how to do that. And she said, that's fine. You'll learn how to do it. And because I
I
want
love
you to be
that.
the one to do it. And I said, so as long as we're clear that I've never done this before and I actually have to look up what it is, I'm happy to go. But what saved me was my co-producer. I don't know if he was given that title, but my co-producer, who ended up being the director and the photographer, the videographer, he taught me how to do this. And what my role was to find the right stories and then to figure out how to tell that story in a way that would resonate with people who don't understand police. Because the purpose of the show was to help people see beyond the badge, to be able to see police officers as people, because they are people. They put their pant legs one leg at a time, and They've got kids at home that they're wiping their snotty noses and cleaning up after them. They're just like us. And so, how do we bring that human face forward? And because I was not a sworn officer, but I had gotten to know the police department quite well by then, I was able to kind of see what the story arc should look like to hook people at the beginning and then to tell the story all the way through, knowing what points we're trying to make. So, one of the things that I learned doing that was if you don't know what your objectives are, like they always say, if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get anywhere. If you don't know what your objectives are, you're going to produce just stuff. But we decided on what our objectives were going to be for each episode that we shot and then edited. I take that forward. I've actually taken that thinking in everything that I do. So if someone comes to me and says, "Can you evaluate this work?" Well, what were the objectives? That's always the first question. And so in a pitch situation, if we jump all the way to what I do today, if an agency is going to pitch a client, if you don't know what role you'd play in that client's business, if you don't know why you're even on the playing field to do work for them, how would you know what to present? Right? So you have to know what the objective is of the person you're talking to, and then what your objective is in the connection. The idea is to connect.
Yeah,
That's what
connect.
Beyond the Badge was. That's what a pitch is. That's what relationships are. It's about connecting, and you can't connect just from your own point of view. You've got to figure out what is the point of view of the person I'm connecting with.
That's spot on, and I love how you started that venture, really not knowing
Nothing.
what you were doing. I mean, I feel like I relate very closely to that because there have been so many situations where I really didn't know what I was doing, but it was like, okay, I'm in. I'll figure it out. I'm up for the
Yep.
challenge.
Good.
Yeah.
I
So
think women don't do that enough.
absolutely,
Honestly, I think women feel like they have to be overqualified to say yes, I'll do it. We're smart. We can figure it out.
absolutely. I feel very empowered right now.
Good.
You were selected to participate in the White House conference on hate crimes with Bill Clinton. What did that moment teach you about leadership at the highest level, and did it change your expectations of leaders you work with now?
It was an amazing experience to get to do that, and I was really sick too. I had I
Oh
had a really
no.
bad, yeah, and but I was going to go no matter what. This is before
Really?
COVID days when you went anywhere sick anyway. Um, well, first of all, just going to the White House for me, I'm a bit of a political junkie. I love all of that, and I also love history, American history in particular. So getting to go into that building
Mm.
was. I still feel a bit awestruck that I got to do it. And I sat in, I went in, there was a breakfast buffet and there were lots of different rooms, the blue room and whatever the rooms were called. And I just sat in all different chairs by myself, just thinking, I wonder who sat here. Just being in that historic space was very, very compelling and very emotional for me. Um, the hate crimes conference itself, it was an area obviously I had a lot of interest in. And I went representing a Jewish organization, so anti-Semitism was, the thing on my mind. Of course, everything is connected, but that's what I was thinking about in particular. Um, what I was most struck by, you asked about leadership, and regardless of how you feel about Bill Clinton politically, I mean, I was a fan of his presidency, not always his personal choices, but his presidency. What I noticed about him, so we had this breakfast at the White House and people were mingling, and then he spoke briefly, but then we went to, I think it was American University, it might have been Georgetown. We went to one of the universities nearby in DC into a large conference space, and the people who were at the breakfast were in the audience. And then up on the stage was a big U-shaped table with President Clinton at the head of that table. And each person that was up there represented a different group that experiences hate, and they told a story. Each one told a story. And it went on it must have taken an hour and a half, maybe. It was very compelling. It was very emotional. It was really an interesting, it was a chance to hear what it's like
Yeah.
from other perspectives. He never took any notes. He sat and he listened. And then he spoke. And he leaned in and he had a personal question or comment for every single person that had spoken. He took zero notes. He didn't take any notes during the time that he was listening. And what I learned about leadership that day was that great leaders know how to listen, but really listen.
Active
Listen,
listening.
listen enough to be able to actually, it's kind of like breathe it in so it becomes part of you, so that when the conversation continues, it's a genuine conversation just about you. Each one of those people had to have felt so special. And for me, I sat there and I thought, I don't know if I listened as well as he did. I mean, I don't even know if I would have thought to ask any of those questions. And what I learned about leadership was that it isn't always about you sitting there. He turned his time into more conversation about them. And it was stunningly special. And something that I'll never forget. And I still aspire to this day to be able to listen with as much interest as he had.
I love that. I think the world would be better if there were more active listeners, people who really
Yes.
listened.
And
Not just feel.
the respect that he had for their stories was just so compelling and beautiful.
I think they're very tied together, listening and respect in a way. So, moving on to the founder era of your life,
Yeah.
you've built a firm that prioritizes precision. So, bringing in exactly the right expertise for each challenge. What problem were you solving with that model?
Well, I founded it with my husband, so I want to make sure that I'm clear of this. Not just me. So Steve and I did this together. But I think the model we started out. Steve really kicked it off, and I was still at the Seattle Police Department when we kicked off the business. I was a contractor there, as a part-time employee there, and on a contract. So I was able to do both things. But what we realized was that, well, most important was Steve was in the corporate world, and we did not want to keep moving with our kids. We liked Seattle. We wanted to stay here. And Steve was not happy. He was working at Weyerhaeuser at the time. Things changed there to a point where he thought, I don't know if I really want to keep doing this. Excuse me, but we didn't want to move. So the Weyerhaeuser folks were wonderful, and they said, well, why don't you consult for us while you're figuring out what you want to do? So what we started doing was trying to figure out, could we find people or companies, excuse me, people who had challenges in front of them that we could help them solve in a short period of time. Project work, essentially, rather than staying on for a long time and then having that ends and to find something else. We wanted something that could be more rolling. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. Sorry. That's what we set up. The idea of the company was to be able to meet people where they were, help them uncover or even take apart their challenge, and help determine solutions to those challenges in project format. Sometimes it would take a month, sometimes it would take 6 months, or however long it would.
So, when I'm curious, when strategy and culture aren't aligned, which one tends to drive the problem? Is it that the strategy is flawed, or that the culture can't support it?
It can be both. It can definitely be both. Culture, the culture of an organization can either support in a huge way the success of a strategy, but it can also sabotage a strategy. And the culture of an organization is different than the kind of cultural stuff that we were talking about earlier, but there are some similarities. And the similarities have to do with the notion of power.
Oh, okay.
So in a company, if people feel compelled to assert their power, their ownership of parts of the organization at the expense of other parts of the organization or other people in the organization, that's when strategies that try to connect across an organization fail. So the power piece is really important, and it's not necessarily an intentional power grab. But sometimes people get set in their ways and they define their success around the processes that they have. And if you try to mess with those processes, they worry really hard that you're going to mess with their success. So when we come in and we work to dismantle certain processes to reimagine something, the culture of the organization either makes it a smooth ride or a bumpy ride.
Oh.
And so when people are open, and when inside the culture there's a sense of camaraderie and collaboration, and your success is my success, it's kind of it's an ideal client. It's a dream because they're open to change, and we can bring ideas, and they'll question them. I'm not saying they just do whatever we say, but they'll ask questions that actually make our work better, make our product better, make the solution at the very end is even better than we imagined it. If we have to drag them each step of the way, and there's constantly, but that won't work, but that won't work because this person will say no, and that person, if we're constantly having to adjust because of the politics of the situation, then we might end up with a suboptimal solution.
Absolutely. And many of your client relationships last 10 to 20 years. So in a culture obsessed with, quarterly wins, how do you help leaders think long term without losing urgency?
Well, the best leaders know how to do that already. And then it's just fun to work with them because they understand, they know. There's a marketer at the grocer Stop and Shop. Lisa Martinelli is her name. She's the brand, she's kind of leads the brand operation at Stop and Shop. And she always talks about brand over time, sales overnight. Is the
Oh,
way that she puts it. I don't know if she invented that phrase, but she's the first person that said it to me. And so now I use it, and I like to
I
give her
love
credit
it.
for that.
Yeah.
So long-term thinking over time, but also thinking about sales overnight. So I think it's absolutely required, especially in a publicly traded company, because the C-suite is beholden to the shareholders.
Yeah.
And that's just that. There's no, whether you like it or you don't like it, that is how it is. You are beholden to the shareholders. And if you don't bring them what they need on a short term basis and on a long term basis, you will be out of a job. And so all the good that you want to do is out the window. So you have to be able to think about both. I'll tell you that years ago we did a review for Ulta Beauty. It was a long time ago. It was right when Mary Dillon became the CEO of Ulta Beauty, female CEO, who it makes sense that that company would have a female CEO, but she was the first female CEO for that beauty company. And Mary knew what she was doing. She's still out there doing her work, but she knew that what she needed to bring to that company was an elevated brand and sales overnight. She had to get points on the board early because it was a publicly traded company. So foot traffic, basket, increasing your basket size, the ways you can count that the business is improving. And we did an agency review for her first creative agency. And there was one agency, I will not name them, they were in the lead going into the presentations. I mean, they had just done great work in the early sessions. And when we sat down, I happened to be sitting next to Mary at the presentations, and they opened with a slide that said, "Here are the 3 business issues you gave us." And I thought, oh, brilliant objectives, right? What are
Yeah.
the objectives? Grow the brand awareness, and elevate the brand. Increase store traffic and increase basket size. I don't know if those are exactly the ones, but they had two short termers and one long term. And then they said, and here's how we view those. And they put an X through the basket size and the traffic and said, until you address your brand, you won't be able to move the needle on the other 2. And
Absolutely.
Mary looked up and she said, huh. And then she looked down, and she was on at that time, her BlackBerry the rest of the presentation.
Oh my God.
They were done because Mary's objective was to do the 3 things at once. She didn't have the luxury of building her brand if she wasn't going to also continue to move sales. And that agency, they were done. They were done. And I will tell you that their creative gave me goosebumps. It was brilliant, beautiful creative. But they did not, they actually showed that they did not understand the objective of the C-suite. And that was it for them.
Wow. That's so interesting.
So that you have to be able to think about it all at one time and figure out how it all pieces together.
Absolutely. So companies like Microsoft and Starbucks, Sprint have, like we just mentioned, stayed with you for decades. What do organizations underestimate about what it really takes to build that kind of long-term trust?
I think I don't know that those organizations are looking for long-term relationships necessarily, especially with consultants like us. Those relationships, those trust relationships, get built person by person versus organization by organization. So we haven't worked with Starbucks in many years, but when we did many projects for a very long period of time. But it had less to do with Starbucks and Mercer Island Group and more to do with the people we knew inside Starbucks
Okay.
and us and the relationships that we built with them. And I think we built the trust relationships with them by knowing and understanding what mattered most to them and being honest about what we could deliver and honest about what they needed to do to be able to get through whatever challenge or obstacle that they had. And that's where the trust gets built. Trust doesn't get built between organizations. It gets built between people. And so while we're not working with Starbucks today, we are working even still with some of the people we used to work with at Starbucks,
Oh,
where they are today. So the relationships are with the people, and people trust you if you are trustworthy. And then I trust clients when they're trustworthy. There are some clients, very few, but there are some clients I really don't need to work with again because I didn't feel that I got the reciprocal trustworthiness that I offered out.
valid. Very
Yeah.
strong point. So you've studied 30 years of agency wins and losses in a market of 15,000 plus agencies. I'm curious, what's the most common blind spot agencies have when they think they're different?
Well, that's the blind spot that they think they're different. Um, Most agencies think that what differentiates them is their people,
Oh, okay, that's very interesting.
but it's not. It can't. That can't be the thing because your people change over time,
Yeah.
and it's not what matters to the client. So it's while I love working with great people, I need to know, can you move my business? I need to know, do you understand my industry? I need to know, do you understand my target audience? Do you get what I need to do, what I need to deliver in order to be able to keep my job, get my bonus, send my kids to college, the things that matter to me as the marketer. So I think agencies think that their tools make them different. All agencies have tools,
Yeah.
especially in the media space, and everyone's tools are good. So I think agencies need to understand that the way to differentiate yourself is to be the one that shows that you understand what the client needs most, and be able to show that, and that you have a way to strategically find white space for them. So what is it about their target audience that connects to their brand in a way that the competition can't or hasn't? If you can show that, you can show how the brand can actually break through to the target audience. Understanding that target audience, that's a run to daylight.
And you've worked in public safety, nonprofit leadership, high stakes corporate consulting, like we talked about. Where do you think innovation happens faster, in government or business? I'm curious.
Business, because things move faster.
Okay.
There are less hurdles, there are less processes in place that require people to have to go through certain rigors. In the public sector, for good reason, in the
Yeah.
public sector, there are certain rules of the road. Like you have to put an RFP. Like, let's say you're a public university and you have an agency that does your creative work. There might be rules that you have to put it up for bid every 6 years or 3 years or 12 years, whatever it is. That's for good reason. So it keeps nepotism and corruption out of government, we hope. We're not finding it's working so well these days, but that is the hope, right? So the public sector has processes that are there that protect the public. And so it makes it harder to bring in something altogether new because there are so many processes in place you have to jump through.
Okay. So across your career, training, facilitation, community academies, consulting, there's always a teaching element. So I'm curious, if do you see yourself primarily as a strategist or at heart an educator?
At heart, I'm definitely an educator. Um, I love teaching people things. I do. I'll never stop. That'll never end for me. But the strategy piece is how my brain works. So if we're going to put together the heart and the head, the education piece is the heart. The strategy is my head. I like to take. It happens for me fairly naturally. So when I see disparate pieces of information, I yearn to figure out how they go together. So if there's a jigsaw puzzle on a table, I'll sit down. I want to see how it ends up. And I prefer actually, what I don't like about jigsaw puzzles is that there is a predetermined answer. I like to figure out what the answer could be based on all the pieces. So I remember back in college, you would write a paper for a class that you were in. The part I liked best was figuring out my thesis. What was my paper going to be? What was I going to prove? So I would gather all the information. Now I know what I'm going to prove. What I hated was writing the paper because I had it in my head. I knew what the answer was. I had done all the work of putting the pieces together. I loved that. That's how my brain works. And so one of the biggest challenges that I ever had was my husband, Steve, said to me, we should teach people how to do strategy the way that you think about it. It would help agencies. So now, how do you put together the head and the heart? How do you take that, what I love to do, which is teach, how do you break down what happens for me without my knowing that I'm doing it? How do I teach that to people? And so we developed a curriculum to teach agencies how to develop strategy and get to insights. And that was the pulling together of everything for me. And I love that workshop.
That's beautiful. So you've received recognition like the Outstanding Volunteerism Alumni Award from Cornell and other leadership honors. Was there a particular moment or project behind one of those recognitions that really stands out to you?
I don't know if there's one in particular. No, I mean there isn't one in particular. I mean, the volunteer work that I did shaped my life in a very, very big way. I had little kids, and I wasn't when we moved to Seattle. I didn't have a job, and I didn't get one for a while because just getting here and getting the kids all set up in school, 3 little kids. But I'm not that person that can just do that and just do, PTA and class parties. I did my fair share of those, but I didn't love that. So I got involved in Jewish organizations because it felt very comfortable for me, and it was a great way to meet people. And I got involved in Jewish philanthropy and in Jewish causes, and then I expanded my horizons, and I did a bunch of work in the childcare community and other things like that. And all of it, people used to say, I can't believe you give that much time to nonprofits and to volunteering. And I always thought, but do you realize it's really very selfish what I do? Because what I get from it is immense. The feeling of doing good, it really does feel good. It feels good to do good. And I also learned how to read a spreadsheet. I learned how to read a profit and loss statement. I learned what budgets were. I learned about deferred expenses. I learned about capital expenses. And I learned all the budgeting and all the backroom stuff about how organizations run that has served me now in my for-profit career. I learned all of that in different volunteer organizations. So there wasn't one thing or one moment that stood out. There was an incident that probably affected me most when I was the board chair of the Jewish Federation of Greater Seattle. There was a hate crime at our federation. A man came in and shot 6 women and killed 1 that worked at our organization. And just by chance, I wasn't there. By luck, by chance, I was not there. And then dealing with the aftermath of that was devastating. And personally challenging. I never thought I would have to.
Yeah,
There was a lot of press and a lot of things I never had done before and didn't know how to do. But again, step in and bring people around you who know how to do it, and then they help you. But that was probably the most impactful moment, but it certainly doesn't define everything I did. Not
Yeah, and I love how this, in a way, it circles back to how you have learned out of everything you've done, and sort of that the power of consciously being aware of where you are and what this opportunity presents itself for you to learn and grow and evolve. Even something as challenging and horrendous as experiencing that hate crime but I think it's so beautiful how you've chosen to grow and learn and transform out of everything you've experienced.
Thank you.
So across public service, consulting, media, authorship, what problem have you found yourself solving over and over again? I'm curious.
Well, I mean, it's certainly with the problem we find ourselves solving over and over again with advertising agencies is figuring out how to talk about themselves in a way that makes sense to clients rather than makes sense to the agency. So it repeats over and over again. I never get tired of it because I always feel like I'm helping somebody grow their business every time we work on it. But the challenge is they all feel close to each other, but yet each one's different. It's just each project I work on, I just feel like I'm trying to help people break through noise that's there that is getting in the way of them doing good work. And we can kind of help them do that. Sometimes just giving them permission to try different things, but there's not something in particular that repeats over and over again.
Okay. Well, Robin, I've loved this conversation. The through line in your work, whether it's public service or consulting or authorship, it really comes back to helping people work better together, which I find fascinating and really inspiring. So thank you for taking this time to share your insights with us and your journey. It's been amazing.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, and thanks for asking about those times of the past that it's fun to talk about.
It is. I can imagine.
You've been listening to Fully Managed, brought to you by Penji. Check out the show notes to learn more about today's guest, and to learn more about Penji, the human-first creative subscription service, head over to penji.co. And by the way, if you're still listening, it would mean the absolute world to us if you were to share this podcast with a friend, and of course, subscribe.